PBA bowlers struggle sometimes on the house pattern. In this video, we're going to cover why that happens and then how to fix it. So stay tuned. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, like I said, we're going to cover why do PBA bowlers struggle on house shots. So these are the questions we're going to answer throughout the video. The first one being, why do bowlers with terrible fundamentals beat bowlers with good fundamentals? Why do bad bowlers do well on house patterns? What's the truth about house patterns? So in this video, we're going to answer each of those questions. So stay tuned and let's go and get into the video. All right, so what we first got to do is explain the differences between a PBA bowler versus an amateur bowler. So an amateur bowler could be a league bowler, or maybe somebody that's in high school or maybe going to college and they do a lot of local tournaments. Now PBA bowler, a person who does PBA regionals a lot, maybe does some PBA national tour events, and they're constantly bowling PBA stuff. So that's the key differences. But the key points I want to cover here is the PBA bowler is more controlled. They're accurate and they read the lanes. Whereas the amateur bowler will ride the friction, they play in area, and they repeat good misses. Some more differences to look at here. The PBA bowler, the misses that they have on a house pattern will result in flat 10s and weak corners. The PBA bowler wants to control the lane, whereas the amateur bowler, the misses results in trip 4s, messengers, and better carry. The amateur bowler wants to use the lane's built-in help. I wanted to just kind of explain the differences between the amateur bowler and the PBA bowler. And this is on the house shot. This is not on sport patterns or on any other thing. I'm talking about the people who go to local amateur tournaments and they bowl in net all the time. I'm talking about those people. I call them professional house pattern bowlers because they don't bowl on anything else. And when they do, that's when their flaws show. And so that's exactly what I'm talking about. So whenever I compare the two, I'm basically comparing the mindsets and what a typical amateur bowler does and what they think, and then what a PBA bowler does and what they think. What's the paradox? House versus sport shot. What we have to look at is the house shot rewards misses. It also rewards rotation, friction creation, and messengers. Sport shot rewards precision, control, repeatability, and strong fundamentals. Ironically, the better your fundamentals are, the less help you will get on a house shot. And really that makes no sense to me because I've been bowling my whole life. It makes no sense. So you're telling me that if I get better with my fundamentals, that I'm actually going to do worse on the house shot? That may not necessarily be the case all the time, but it does make it harder for you to score because, like I'm saying, the house pattern will reward your misses, whereas a sport shot will not. And so when you're constantly practicing trying to hit that board, well, you're actually hurting yourself when you go back to bowl on that house pattern. And it makes no sense, but it's almost the opposite of the way that a normal bowler would think. You would assume that the PBA bowler is going to be doing great because they are so accurate. Well, they can be, but they got to have the right strategy, and we will cover that. All right, so what's the truth about house patterns? House patterns, whether they are modified or not, are set up the same. They have high oil in the middle. They are dry to the outside. This creates miss room. That means if you miss right, the ball hits the dry and then hooks back. But if you miss left, the ball hits the oil and holds its line. And that allows bad shots to strike. But why does bad fundamentals work? Bowlers with bad fundamentals have matched their flaws perfectly to the house pattern. So a college kid or a high school kid who may play a certain line that doesn't move much probably spins it, misses right, and has an inconsistent release. On a sports shot, this would be a disaster, but on house, the shot is perfect because he or she will have free hook and hold, which will allow for much more strikes. All that being said, again, you would assume that the professional is going to do good, that the professional will be great on the house shot, but that may not be necessarily the case because, again, you got to have the right strategy in place in order to really understand the adjustments. Because just to explain this more in detail, like when I practice, I'm practicing trying to hit a target. Now, a lot of bowlers out there think they're hitting their target, but they're not. And when that shows up is when you do bowl on these PBA patterns, because if you're missing by a board or two, that's the difference between you getting a strike and you having a split. We're talking about one board or two, depending on how hard the pattern is. Let's just assume you're bowling on the US Open pattern. You have one board, that's it. You go left of that, or you go right of that. That could be a split. One board. And if you slow your speed down just a little bit, maybe you're not right on, again, that could be another split. Now you could get away with it. Maybe you get a Brooklyn. You don't know. But that's normally the difference. Whereas in a house pattern, normally you may have at least 3 boards to play with if you're playing that area. And so it's much different. But when a PBA bowler is hitting a target, let's say that they miss a board right or a board left on the house pattern, well, that's when the flat 10s happen. That's when they can't carry. And it's because they're hitting their target, and they're hitting the pocket, but they're not creating the right angle. So a lot of the amateur bowlers, what they do is they bounce the ball off the friction. And so they play the area. And it seems like that they can play there about all day. But when you take that same bowler who's playing that area and then you put them on a PBA pattern, well, then everything changes. Now that person who has created their own version of who they are on the house pattern, that version does not go off and then bowl on the sport pattern, and then that never works because this version only works on this pattern. You can't take that version and put them on a sport pattern because it's like taking a NASCAR who's meant for the track, and that's all that they do, and then take that same car and put that on a road course. It's probably not going to do very good. The Porsche or the Ferrari may do a lot better on the road course than a NASCAR would, but because a NASCAR is not built for that. A NASCAR is built to go fast and hit corners and go around in circles. Whereas a Ferrari, a Porsche, Nissan GT-R, whatever, Toyota Supra, they're meant for a road course. They're meant to race, take corners pretty hard. They're meant to be able to drift. That's the difference. And that's the reason why I'm trying to explain this is you have your amateur bowler and you have your pro bowler, 2 different mindsets, 2 different strategies, but one actually does better on the house pattern because they may have a better strategy. All right, so let's go into more detail here. Why do PBA bowlers struggle more? Even though PBA bowlers are good, they may struggle more because they are more precise. They stay behind the ball and control angles and hit their target more precisely. That means there is less friction created, less bounce from the drive, and less hold from the oil. That means the PBA bowlers don't benefit from the pattern's forgiveness as much. The assumption is a PBA bowler will dominate on house patterns, but that may not be true. PBA bowlers are trained to read subtle transitions, control the break point, and minimize variables. On house shot, they actually need to open up, use friction, and create miss room on purpose. So just to kind of double down on that, that's basically what I'm saying. PBA bowlers are trained to do one thing, and on a house pattern, it's actually the complete opposite. And so you're trying to take a bowler who's trained for this one thing, put them back on the house pattern where all your adjustments are now not the same. It's almost like you're learning a different language all over again because what you learned before doesn't work over here. And so now you got to go back to your old stuff of what you learned on whenever you were a kid, and you're trying to take a professional and make them go back to the basic level. And sometimes it works, but a lot of times it won't work. They may average 200, 210, 220, but the professional house bowler, house pattern bowlers, that's what I call them, they will sometimes average 250, 260, whereas a pro bowler could average 220. So that's normally the difference. Not to say that the pro bowler couldn't average 250, 260, because they could if they had the right strategy in place. So why are amateur bowlers better on house? Without knowing it, they are matching speed, rev rate, and friction. They let the pattern shape the shot. They repeat a zone and not a board. They create more angle even if it's sloppy. And that's why that they can live in one place all day long. And how I can say this is I just bowled in the Ironman tournament. Ironman tournament is in Evansville, Indiana, and they have a tournament where you bowl 18 games. It's a very grueling format, and you would assume a PBA bowler like myself would do great. You know, I got the energy, I got the stamina, I got the endurance. Well, and you would assume the league bowlers wouldn't be able to last very long. Well, they actually did. They actually did last long. Why? Because they are professional house pattern bowlers, and they've done this before. Now, I don't know about how their body felt, how they were able to get through all the pain, because I know for me, I was in pain. My legs were hurting. I was in a lot of pain. So if I'm in pain, I'm sure they're in pain. Maybe they're just not letting it be known. But I know for me, I was limping around game 15, game 16, because it's tough out there. I mean, that's a lot of games in one day. They had 2 9-game blocks. And so these guys, they're bowling 240s, 250s, 260s like nothing. Had a 300 game out there, had a 279, a couple of 279s. But I mean, they're averaging way up there. But they're professional house pattern bowlers. This is what they do. Whereas for me, again, my adjustments are totally different. And so my adjustments in my head are not going to work on a house pattern, even if it's modified and it's heavier oil. It's not going to work. And so that's what I learned by going and doing that tournament, is that if I do something like that again, I'm gonna have to have a different strategy in order to do better and in order to be able to compete. So what's the right adjustment? So what you could do is, if you're a PBA bowler, you could play more right and maybe play 8-5 or maybe even 10-5, but move your break point farther in and bounce it off that friction. You could add some rotation. You could let the ball float through the front and use weaker equipment and maybe use a polish or like a shiny pearl. And so that's a strategy that could work. It could work because you're now letting the ball get into the friction and maybe bounce it off there. That way you got some room to play with. Now, there's some house patterns out there that's very low volume, and so that may or may not work. And then there's some out there that's higher volume. So you gotta really think about your strategy and how you're going to do it. But more or less, you gotta actually use what's built into the house pattern. So use the friction and make sure you can bounce it off there. That way you're not in between, because normally if you play around 11 to 10 or 7, between 11 and 7, that area there is a good area to play if you're trying to control the pocket. But in order to have higher scores, you got to create the right angle to the pocket in order to create those mixers that have messengers slide across the lane and have a lot of pin reaction. And so what you want to do is, on a house pattern, you got to create more angle in order to get into the pocket, to create more reaction down lane, which will then create more strikes and then higher scores. All right, so what's the mental shift? So instead of thinking that better execution will win, think better matchup will win. So like what I was saying before, you got to match up better. House shots are designed to reward mistakes in not perfect execution. Take advantage of the environment. Stop trying to control the pattern and use what's given to you. Trust the miss. Beat the amateurs by blending your skill with the patterns built in the shape. So in closing, on sports shots, the best bowler in general wins, but on house shots, the best matched up bowler wins. So again, on house, it comes down to who matches up the best. It's not the person with the best fundamentals, it's not the one with the best rhythm. It's all about matching up. Can the bowler match up, and can he pick up his spares? And if he or she can, then there you go. That's probably who's going to win on a house shot, whether it's modified or not. And so hopefully you take that in. In the next video, I will cover more of the strategy and how you can bowl better on this house pattern if you are a pro bowler. Because I know for me, it's the question I've asked myself 100 different times. You go into these tournaments and you're thinking, how are these bowlers doing so good? I mean, I'm practicing 2-3 times a week, and these guys come in here once a week and they're putting up 250s. How's that possible? And so that's what I hope this video answers for you. I hope it answers the question. And then the next video I will cover more of the strategy part, more of the adjustments of what you could do. So stay tuned for that. And then if you like this video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and then I will see you in the next one coming up. So thanks for watching.